I would make it a point to celebrate even the smallest win. You also get a lot of setbacks along the way. Right? Just trying to learn from that is also helpful because those are the things that help you. 6 months later, you're stronger and wiser.
So Abhishek, what was life like before becoming the CEO of Elucidator?
First, let me thank you, Theo, for having us over. This is a great platform, and we are very happy to be part of it. I also appreciate your, patience and flexibility as we're trying to put this on our calendars.
No problem.
So, a life before CEO of Elucidator. So it was much saner for one. But this last 6 years as you have been I've been living a dream. Uh, it's so exciting to convince really talented folks to come and join us on our mission. Convince our investors to come and join our mission, and also eventually the customers, right, where we are helping them with a very critical pain point. Before Elucidator, I was a scientist at Agios. My entire formal training has been that of a scientist. I did my PhD at the University of Chicago, and then a postdoc at MIT. And soon after, towards the end of my tenure at MIT, I learned about a small biotech, actually through a friend who was consulting for a company in not very far from MIT, Agios Pharmaceuticals. At the time, they were very small, very early, very promising biotech. I took up a role with them. I was leading the data science team in the platform group. And it was an incredible 5.5 years for me. Among other things, I hung out with very talented scientists with different background and expertise. And what was incredibly satisfying was that the team was able to bring two first-in-class drugs to the patients for acute myeloid leukemia. And they have both been now approved by the FDA. So just having had a chance to play a very tiny role in that entire journey was incredibly satisfying. And you could see that all the papers that you read or papers that you wrote, for that matter, would translate into helping an individual and their families in such a profound way. Was something surreal, right? And Agios gave me that opportunity, and I could also see as how someone with my skill set, how they can impact the journey of a therapeutics company, and eventually how that could help patients. And what was the promise of it? What were the limitations of it? How does it fit in the entire ecosystem, right? And Agios was a very good experience to learn all of that. And 5 years later, I felt the company was in a very different place. I was in a different place.
Yep.
And based greatly on my own experience as a scientist there, which by no means were unique. I thought there's a need in the market that we can help a lot of other scientists like me who were helping therapeutics companies and eventually patients who are waiting for a therapy. And that, I had a sense of urgency about that, which is why I thought I would start something like Elucidator.
Fantastic. That's a great story. I really appreciate you sharing that with me. Well, with the community as well. I guess, a first question would be initially, what were the biggest challenges you faced when you started Elucidator?
Yeah, I think, there's always a different phase, like, companies have their own lives. And I'm also a young father. So I see a lot of parallel between raising a child, a son, in our case, and starting a company. And in the early days, we had me and my co-founders, we had a choice to make. One path, which was none of them were easy, but they had their own pros and cons. One path was to go out and raise funds to build a product, right? And we would have been, and we are first-time founders. So that would not have been easy. We were not, for example, in Illucida Therapeutics, we were not trying to make a drug. And I was in Boston. So in Boston, like, unless you have a therapeutics at the end of your company's name, like it's hard to, get any attention from the talent pool or the VCs or anything at all, right? Like that was, that is more or less still the norm, not so much in the Bay Area. So that was path one, right? Like to go out and raise some funds, build a product, get it, release it to the market. And the other path was just get out in the market, right? I had a thesis, and it was something that I had cooked up based on my own experience. As a scientist, I would always put a question mark, like, is that real? Like, is that shared by my colleagues? And that thesis, we thought, okay, the other path is just bring it to the market, right? Let's start working with our eventual customers, right? And have them not just pay for it, but also give their feedback to tell us, like, where is that clear pain point for them, where we could help them, and of course they could pay us, right? And that is the path that we chose. Again, that was hard in its own way, but it was also helpful in some ways, where we started getting paid almost right away, right? We were revenue positive pretty much on day one, and then it also gave us a little bit of breathing room. As a first-time founder, I was learning a lot of things. My team was building a team, right? We had no brand. We barely had a website in the early days, but trying to convince, friends and families or colleagues to come and join us in some shape and form as an angel investor, or as a customer, or as an employee, right? That was a lot of work. It also would give me a lot of high, because anytime you convince someone, right, like often these guys are very talented, very capable. They have multiple options, right? Be it a potential employee, be it a potential customer, be it an investor, right? We all have options, and to be able to convince that person at that moment that, hey, no, okay, next 3 years of my life I'll give it to Illustrator, that was an incredible reward, right? And the good news is that even when I look back, which has not been a long time, and we are very much still in this process. I don't think I mean to communicate that we have arrived in any shape or form yet. Every week was better than the last one, right? And I remember that I would make it a point to celebrate even the smallest wins, which in hindsight looks silly and ridiculous, right? I remember we got our first NDA, which was a pretty benign document, right? Anyone and everyone gives you an NDA, more or less. But I remember we had a big, celebration with my co-founder and my wife. That did not lead to anything at all, but it was a good, good thing to celebrate. And you also get a lot of setbacks along the way, right? So just trying to learn from that is also helpful, because those are the things that help you. 6 months later, you're stronger and wiser, and a year later you have some idea, you have some scars, tissues, and you have learned your lessons, right? So early days were very different, very fun, but again, I think we have come a long way, but we have so much more to do.
Fantastic. You mentioned pain points there, and I think that's an interesting way to go. I think a lot of companies, right, it'll take them quite a long time to actually find a real pain point in the market that they can really leverage. How quickly, for you, Abhishek, did you find that pain point where it was like, okay, this is something that is going to be fit for purpose? And how much was it just developing and making everything spot on, in what a better word?
Yeah. And that's the hardest part of, I think, any product company, right? Finding that, which is, in some other language, it would be labeled as product market fit, right?
Yes.
Some pain point that you find, which people are willing to pay for, hopefully enough to make a sustainable, large, enterprise, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully enough of, users and customers are out there with that same pain point, right? And is hard because, as a scientist or as a user yourself, right? You have a thesis, right? You think this is a pain point, and you might be in the neighborhood, but finding the right, like if you're a group, like finding that right point, right, with that
Yes.
specific point where you press on it and you get a response, like you get an emotional, very visceral response from your customer. That is hard.
Yeah.
Right? That requires a lot of back and forth. That requires a lot of iterations. And I think we took our own sweet time, right? So we spent first 3 years just building the product in the market. Then we did a small seed round, and then we launched the product 10 months later. And it took us a while to get to that exact pain point, which we saw a consistent, oh, this is the same pain point for someone else
Yeah.
and someone else, and you start reading that pattern. And it's not easy because you're getting a lot of signals from the market, right? The customers are pulling you in 20 different directions, and you have to really squint your eyes, parse the signal, and at some point back yourself up. Oh, I'm on the right track. And 2 months later or 2 weeks later, you will figure out you're not, and then you step back and do it again, right? So that process, I think, took us a good chunk of time. I think most of our time has been just to figuring that piece out. And
Fantastic.
the good part and the bad, frustrating part is that for all those months and years, we were in the same neighborhood. So you think that you're there,
Yeah.
and then no, not really, and then you try again and again, and then when you find it, you will know, because it's just yeah.
Yeah. I guess, I suppose it's a constant trial and error, right? Until you get that.
Yeah. And as a first time founder, like and I see this in a lot of what I consume on LinkedIn or others, right? And there's no shame in not knowing what that is on day one or even day 365, right? Like it's always a process.
Fantastic.
And yeah.
Awesome. I guess another question here. I always like to ask this one. What are some of the challenges of the role that may not be so obvious? As a CEO that started from angel investing and grew it up, what are some of the challenges that maybe other CEOs encounter but aren't so obvious to the rest of people who aren't in that position?
So I think for me, what has been a revealing part of this, and there are many, right? Like I tell this to my friends and colleagues or anyone who would listen to me. This is the best self-improvement project that I could have signed up for, right? Like,
okay,
you just don't have a choice. You have to handle things, right? Things that are way outside your comfort zone. As a scientist, things that are outside of my comfort zone is like almost everything. There's only a few things that you specialize over many years, and that you're comfortable there. But anything outside is like even a different scientific area for that matter is outside my comfort zone. So for me, I just put myself out there to do all of this. And what is lost, like that consumes your mental space completely, right? It just exhausting. I cannot stop it. And again, for better or worse, and that comes at the cost of your friends and families, right? Like they have to support all of that. And they're in some ways the unsung hero of entrepreneurship, where I'm not as accessible to my wife or my siblings or my parents, as I should be, and perhaps I would have been in a different role, right? It's very consuming, which is also fun. It gives you also a lot of high, right? And even prior, like when I was doing my PhD or postdoc, scientific questions that a graduate student in MIT or Iowa or Zurich would be solving or addressing, right? It consumes them, right? You think about that while you're taking a shower and all of that, right? But this is quite something different because you're dealing with people, right? Again, your team. Once you have hired them, you don't have to worry just about their salaries, but also a career for them, right? You would hope that after spending 5 years with the elicitor, they would have more options and possibilities ahead of them. Same with your investor, right? After they give you their funds and capital and their advice and their expertise, you'd hope that you give them more than that. And your customers, most importantly. So The kind of mental space that this idea illustrator has occupied has been very satisfying, but also very demanding. Right? And to others, I would make sure that they have enough of a support system um, to do that, because it's hard. It's also fun. I don't mean to discourage fun, but it's also fun. But I'm very lucky to have that kind of support system.
Awesome. And a similar question here to end this segment is, we always end with this question here, is if you were sat in a room full of CEOs, what would be one piece of advice that you would share with them?
If I was doing what? Say that again.
Sat in a room full of other CEOs, fellow CEOs, what is one piece of advice you would share with them that would add value? We've kind of touched on it there, but is there anything else you would say if you could?
What kind of advice I would share with other CEOs in a room? Is that?
Yeah, in a similar sort of position.
Yeah. So I've been in such rooms, and I think it's very helpful. Like there's some comfort and pleasure in just living through someone else's experience. That it feels good to know that others have had the same problem or the same struggles and same highs right along the journey. So it helps me a lot. What I would tell them is also this role is a little lonely, right? There's some things that you cannot share or with even your co-founder at times, right? Or your family, right? They get sick and tired of hearing the same thing all the time, right? And it's a lonely job, and it's okay to be to acknowledge that you don't know, you're trying to figure it out as well. And whenever I have been transparent or candid to a level that would be perhaps surprising in a situation, people around me have responded well, and that's my team, that's my support system, that's our customers, that's our investors. And one recent situation, which is not quite far off, it was in April, May,
okay,
where when the COVID second wave or third, I don't forget the count, hit India really hard, and a lot of our team members are in India. And it was just like something that no one, well, someone could have planned for it. We could not. We did not. And the impact was very visible, very disappointing, and very severe. And I think I was going through a lot at that point. I was very candid. I was very transparent. And my team responded amazingly well to that. Everyone stood up, tried to take care of their colleagues and the community as best as they can. Our customers showed up, raised their hands. They helped us quite a lot, all the way from suspending every deadline to sending cards and their wishes and prayers messages. Our investors were like super supportive. So I think you'd expect the stereotype or what is in the mainstream media is about CEOs being this alpha tough, someone who knows it all the time. Not true, at least in my experience, right? For whatever it's worth. And every time I have been more transparent, more vulnerable, and shared that, my people around me have responded very well to that, and I have benefited from that. I have learned from it, and I hope everyone is in a better place at the end of the crisis, like that.
That's a great point, and it sounds like Elucidate has a great culture there, Abhishek, and that's almost a perfect segue into I understand that you're hiring for some awesome AE roles right now. So if we just jump into those quickly, in your eyes, what's needed to sell into multidisciplinary research and development teams, Abhishek?
Yeah, so again, we're hiring a lot. We're growing rapidly. We have, I think this quarter alone, we have made 42 offers. I learned about this morning, and A's are also what we are hiring. They are clearly, at the front line of, driving the growth of the company. Much like any other role that I try to recruit, we have been very clear that, put the customer's interest first, right?
Yeah.
And in my role as a first-time founder CEO who was responsible for selling as well, right? I learned a lot about what sales is not. So sales
Yeah.
is not making things up. It's not talking. It's not. In fact, it's exactly the opposite things.
Yeah.
And that's more true in B2B enterprise sales, right? Where there are many stakeholders. It's not a one-time and done thing. It's not a with due respect. It's not a uh, a one-time transaction, right? And there are a lot of businesses like that, which I'm sure will be doing good. But this is a different piece, right? So being very transparent, being very educated about what we can do and what we cannot, and how our technology can help. If you can put the customer interests front and center, and everything around is dictated by that, I think they will do well.
Fantastic. A last question on that is, how essential is a life science background here, based on the product that you sell?
Not a whole lot. I think it's nice to have for sure, right?
Okay.
But what I have learned, and again, from my own experience and consuming podcasts like these and blogs, right, is the average selling price, right? Like as to what is the dollar value that you have sold at. That is a better indicator of how you will do in a role like this or any
Okay.
sales role than the particular space, right? So if you've been selling $1 million contracts, I think you will do fine in any industry that is selling any role that is selling $1 million contracts. 10,000 is a different beast. $10 is a different beast. 10 million is a different beast. So I think that to me is a more transferable variable than do you have a PhD in life sciences or not? Because guess what? At the end of the day, scientific expertise is not a monolith, right? Even after spending 15 years doing one thing, my colleague on the same floor doing something else, I'm completely novice to that. So I again have to listen to them and understand from very basic first principles to learn what their challenges are. So you have a PhD, great. If you're listening, even better, right? So so I think those are the more common things that I believe are traits that are more transferable than if you have sold to same customers, or not.